The story starts where a lot of stories starts, a champion. Although this champion wasn't a hero, this champion was far from it. He was a man who's done horrible things, but he did it all in the name of his country. His name was Barou. As Barou was traveling with his men, they would go across a rebel base. The rebel base was completely fortified. And well, it would be hard to get inside. You see, in this world, there is one government that unites humanity, the church. Long ago, there was many different kingdoms, but the church overthrew them all. But now there are rebels in the civil war that want to limit the church's power. Barou was the church's top commander, and he was their most brutal one, and he would be called to do the dirty work no one else would want to. As his forces surrounded the base, his men would ask what to do, as he had a plan. As he went to one of the hostages of war, as he went down to the prisoner, he said, "Sir, do you want to be free?"
Would look at Barou confused. Free? Why would he just free him? He was known as one of the most ruthless commanders that the army had. The fact that he would just let one of his prisoners go didn't make any sense. So he looked and said, "What's the catch? You have to try to negotiate them surrendering." As he said, "I'll never do that." As then he says, "I looked at my files. Seems you had kids. It would be a shame if you never saw them again," Barou would say. As the old Barou would be disgusted with this behavior, but now his heart has become cold and rotten, as he's able to do whatever it takes. As Barou would then look at the man and say, "Well, if you want to, you're gonna have to be let go." As then he said, "Fine, I'll try to talk him into surrendering, but I know they won't go for it." As then Barou and his army surrounding the base would then let the hostage in. As the walls opened and let him in, suddenly an explosion would be heard as Barou strapped an explosive device to the hostage. As Barou's men charged in, no one was spared. Everyone was slaughtered and made an example of. As Barou would walk in and look at the carnage, he would look at everything around him burning down, as not a single word was uttered, and no cheers were met. The army didn't like Barou. He was used by the military and by the government to do the dirty work that no one else wanted to do. Everyone despised him, even their own men. He only ruled by fear. As he watched everything around him burn, he would see a bird fly towards him.
Government often used birds for messengers. However, these birds were special. They had magic by the Pope themselves. As the crow would land on Barou's shoulder, it would begin to talk. "Dear Barou, we hear of a rebel plot to end your life." Barou would laugh and say, "The rebels have tried to take me over and over. If they think they can, let them try." As in the crow would say, "Amusing, but no. The Pope demands that you hide out for a few weeks before he can discover the plot." Barou would say, "I do not want to hide. I want to continue my campaign to crush the rebels." The crow would say, "That's an order." The one person Barou couldn't deny, Pope, even though he didn't really care about the Pope. He didn't really care about anything else other than victory. However, Barou would simply nod. As he would say, "So, where am I gonna be?" "In a noble's house," the crow would say. "You're joking. Nobility hates me." Not all of them. As the crow flew away, Barou would simply sit down and wait. As then he saw something, a car. Cars were extremely rare, and they were powered by steam. Only the most rich and powerful could have a car. As the car drove in, the door opened. As a man named Alfred was driving. He was a noble. As Barou walked in and said, "You look pretty fancy for a butler." "I'm not the butler, I like to drive." "A noble that does his own work. How surprising." As Barou sat next to him, Alfred would begin to drive him to his home, as they would make small talk. Strange, Barou was used to no one wanted to talk to him. No one wanted to associate with him. After all, he was known as the war criminal, and the one who was used to get the job done, not some friend. As Barou says, "Why are you so interested in talking to me?" "I like you, Barou. I heard about your missions, and I have a connection with you." This shocked Barou, as Barou would listen to Alfred, as there was something about him. Usually, Barou didn't like talking to people. After all, he liked to keep things to himself, but Alfred was different. He had a warm way about him, like he had a warm and kind soul. Barou hadn't seen anything like that in years. As Barou went to Alfred's house, he was shocked as he didn't see any butlers or maids or anything, but the house was just big and empty. Barou would say, "You maintain this thing by yourself?" "No, I call in a couple people every week or two. Why not have them work here all the time? Because I don't like being around people." This shocked Barou. He was so talkative and interested in him, but he doesn't like people? How does that make any sense? Barou would then look at Alfred and say, "What do you want?" As Alfred would say, "Straight to the point, are we?" "Your detective skills are amazing." Barou would say, "Is this some sort of trap?" No. "I wanted to say thank you for saving me, Barou." Barou would say, "What are you talking about? You may not remember this, but I was 15 and, well, you were 20. You just started your job in the army." As in a flashback would concur. As Alfred was with his guards, suddenly they would all be shot down by a sniper. As Alfred fell to the floor, as he would cry and shake in fear, suddenly the sniper would fall to the ground, no longer with us. As Barou would jump down and throw down more bodies. "They're taken care of." "Nobility, huh? You can go now." As in Barou left, Alfred would say, "Wait, I have to thank you. Please take I don't want your money. I don't want anything anymore," Barou would say as he left. Alfred would say, "I'd never forgotten that. And I wanted to say thank you and ask you for a favor. And, well, I know you saved my life and I don't deserve to ask you for something," but Barou would say, "Stop. You deserve to ask for anything you want. You're your own man," as Barou would actually smirk. As Barou would slowly walk up to him and say, "You can ask me whatever you want. Now, what is it?" Alfred would say, "Can you teach me how to defend myself? I don't want to rely on others. I had elite guards that night, but they did nothing. But you did all that by yourself. Teach me how to be strong." Barou would say, "I will, but it won't be easy. And your bones might break. How long do we have?" Alfred would say, "You're going to be with me for 3 weeks. I'll give you a week's lesson." "Why only a week lesson?" Alfred would say, "Because the other 2 weeks you'll be in the hospital." Barou would then smirk. As then, Barou and Alfred began to train. As Barou would walk outside and say, "Hit me, Alfred." As Alfred would try to hit him, Barou would dodge every attack swung at him. As then he would throw Alfred a sword. As Alfred would say, "What do you want me to do with this?" "Use the sword. I'll use my fist." "But I could. Trust me, I'll be fine." As Alfred swung his sword, Barou would punch him in the gut. And each time he swung and missed, Barou would punch him. As he punched him again and again and again. But each time, Alfred got a little bit faster. Each time, the pain motivated him to do more. But eventually, Barou would say, "All right, that's enough." "You all right?" Alfred would cough up a bit of blood and say, "Yeah, I'm fine." As Barou and Alfred would go into the house. As Alfred would sleep in a separate bed, Barou would look right next to him. The bed had a picture of him and some woman. It seems like his wife, but he didn't really see her around. As the next day, Barou would walk up to Alfred and say, "Hey, when is your wife gonna be home?" Alfred would sigh and say, "What are you talking about?" "The picture." As then Alfred said, "She's no longer with us." Barou would say, "I'm sorry." As then Alfred would say, "I get the opinion that you're not like everyone else. Could you keep a secret?" Barou would then go, "Is it against our nation?" "Well, yes and no." Go on and tell me now," Barou would say, as then Alfred would start to tell Barou something. Alfred would tell him about what happened to his wife. As 2 years after they were married, her wife was curious why Alfred never made any advancement towards her. As Alfred set her down and began to talk to her, as he looked into her eyes and said, "I'm gay," which was a big no-no in this society. In Barou's world, the church controls everything, and being gay was not really something to be proud of. As she cried and ran in and grabbed a knife, and well, Alfred would try to talk her out of it, but he couldn't, as she ended her existence.
As we cut back to present day, Alfred would start to cry and say, I'm a freak. Because of me, she's... As then Barou would hug him and say, you're not a freak. As then Alfred hugged back and said, I thought you were going to arrest me. Barou would say, I should. The old me would have, but just one day with you made me feel something special.
When Alfred shared their kiss, they would enjoy each other and be with each other for a few days. As Barou was starting to learn how to love, it's been so long since he opened up. It was so long since he felt anything. This felt so nice. However, someone was watching, but it wasn't a person, it was a bird. As the crow from earlier watched this with disgust as it flew towards the Pope and told him everything. As the Pope would glimmer, my right-hand man has become an F-slur. It seems that we should get rid of him. As the Pope then stood up, he was going to deal with Barou. Barou was his top commander and his second in command. However, he could not let this slide. He committed a sin, and he will be punished. As then we cut back to Barou and Alfred, as they were sitting next to each other eating breakfast. Alfred would say, I didn't know you could cook. Barou would say to Alfred. Alfred would say, you don't have any servants around because, well, you don't want to see anyone. You learn. As in, Barou would hold Alfred's hand and say, I love you, Alfred. I know it's only been a few days, but you made me feel happy when no one else has. You made me feel something in my soul. As Alfred would say, I feel the same way. But then suddenly the door would bust open as the Pope would walk in. So, my top commander is an F-slur. Very fascinating. And Barou would say, Sir, what are you? Don't you dare sir me. Do you have any idea about the crime you committed? Do you have any idea? As then, Barou would say, do you have any idea how much of an a-hole you are? As then, the Pope would be extremely mad. As he would snap his fingers, suddenly Barou and Alfred would fall down tied up. As the Pope would say, it seems you've forgotten your place. It's a shame, Barou. You are my most loyal dog. You did everything I asked of you. Even the stuff more brutal. Even the stuff that the most honorable men wouldn't. But now, it's time I get rid of you. As then the Pope would take Barou and Alfred out. As he would fly up, having them float up to a wall. This was no ordinary wall, though. This wall separated humanity from the Badlands. In this world, there are two different races, humans and monsters. And the monsters lived in the Badlands. The Pope says, now you'll be eaten by monsters. You'll suffer. That's what you get. And then you'll go straight to hell for your actions. As Barou would look at Alfred and say, I'm sorry I did this to you. I'm sorry, thanks to me, Alfred said, I lived a miserable life, but the days I've been with you are the happiest I ever been. I love you. Barou would say, you too. As the Pope said, how can you love someone like that? How can you love someone who's... Barou would say, it's funny. I found love only being 36. And you found love never. In your 300 years of ruling humanity, no one has ever loved you. The Pope would say, I'm not allowed to get married. Did you just make that rule as an excuse because you're a lonely piece of... Suddenly, the Pope would behead Alfred as he threw his body off the wall. As then he said, I'm getting tired of that mouth. Barou would say, I'm going to die anyway. I might as well make you suffer with me. Pope would say, since you're going to hell anyway, I might as well show you the flames. As then the Pope would light Barou on fire with magic. As he felt his face begin to burn. As then he was thrown off the wall. As Barou fell from that wall, he thought he was going to die. Luckily for him, though, he would land on cold, thick mud. Somehow this broke his fall, even from hundreds of feet, causing him to survive. As he stood up, his face was almost entirely burnt off. As he looked down, he saw Alfred's body and his head next to it. As he got on his knees, he began to cry and say, Goodbye, my love. Barou couldn't mourn long, however, because he heard footsteps. As he turned around him, there were 5 beasts. These strange monsters, these strange beings would look at Barou as a giant lizard man would charge at him and try to claw at him. But Barou would dodge last second and jump onto the monster and grab its head and rip it clean off. As the other people looked, he saw lizard men all around him. As another one charged at him, he would grab its arm and pull it off and use it as a weapon to slay the beast. As the other two were impressed, the lizard would walk up to him and say, "You know how to fight, human. Tell me, you look important. That armor you have on, were you a warrior of sorts?" Barou would say, "Yes, I was. We'll take you to the chief. He might have use for you." Barou would follow along as he was brought on to a big lizard. This lizard was unlike the rest, as the rest were only around 8 feet tall. This one was 20 feet tall, and his arms were long. His scales were tough, and he had sharp claws, but Barou was not scared as he stared at him straight in the face. He said, "Normally I would devour a human like you, but we need help. We're at war."
Barou would then smirk and say, "War? War? Well, that's my specialty. Who are you at war with? 7 tribes. You see, ever since the monsters were defeated by humans, we've been separated into tribes, waiting for the man to bring us all together, or the woman to unite monster kind once and for all to get revenge on the humans. These tribes are after us because we own the Kaiser's helmet." Barou would say, "The Kaiser? Wasn't that the monster who tried to conquer humanity?" "Wrong. He tried to unite humans and monsters under one banner, but he was defeated by a priest." Barou would then sigh and say, "That priest is the Pope," as he would clench his fist. As then, the leader looked surprised. "You know him? He's still alive. And you don't like him?" "No. Looks like we have a common enemy then. Whoever gets the full armor will be able to unite monster kind. However, these 7 tribes have beaten us back more and more, and I don't see any way of victory. We may be strong, but they outnumber us, and each one has special abilities." Barou would then smirk and say, "I have an idea.
"Do you know how to make alcohol, like whiskey of sorts?" As then he would say, "Of course, we're monsters, not barbarians, but why would you need that?" "I have a plan. Pretend to surrender. Have all the chieftains meet you here. Then throw it on them and light them on fire. And when they're weakened, your men will surround and attack them. We'll dig holes at the bottom of our floor and have our men surround and flank them. Even if we're outnumbered, if we can attack them from below and attack them from the side and hit them everywhere and trap them into a point, we can win." As then the chieftain said, "That would work, but it's unhonorable to do so. It's unhonorable." Barou would say, "Honor doesn't win battles. If you want to win this war, if you want to survive, you have to give up your honor." The chieftain would then think and say, "You're lucky we're desperate, but if we fail, it's on you." As then he would walk off. As Barou would stay there for a few days, as it took a week to get everything prepared, the monsters would actually start to like Barou. Barou was disliked by his men through his brutality, but here the monsters admired brutality, and even though they had a sense of honor, Barou made a lot of sense, saying that honor doesn't win battles. And they respected him because he was tough. They saw humans as squishy and weak, but Barou was able to take down 5 lizards at once. Everyone respected Barou. As eventually the tribes would come, as the 7 chieftains all sit down with the main one, all of their armies came there. They had wolves, insects, and other monsters. However, Barou's men hid underground and waited for the time to strike from above. As suddenly, the chieftain lizard would have a drink with all of them to celebrate them having peace. However, then he would pour whiskey on all of them and light them on fire. As a drowns of whiskey came in, buckets were dropped as it fell down the mountain. As then it was lit on fire, lighting up tons of them, lighting them to flames. And as they were lit on fire, Barou's men came from underground and struck them from behind. Even though they were outnumbered 5 to 1, them being struck from behind and having a massive fire rain on them caused them immense fear as they ran away in terror, as they ran away defeated. As in only a few hours, one of the biggest armies was defeated. As Barou walked up, the lizard looked as the 7 tribes were dead. As he said, "Thank you. There are remnants. We can assimilate them and start our journey." Barou would say, "I want to challenge you for the mask." As then, the chieftain would look at him shocked. "You what?"
The giant lizard looked at him. He said, "Do you even know my name?" Barou would say, "You never told me. It's Rex. We were so focused on everything, I've never told you that. You see, Barou, we don't focus on names or much else. What we focus on is battle. Some of us believe in honor, though, but it appears that honor is outdated. You taught me that. So, because of that, I will reward you by fighting you unhonorably." As then, his tail began to wrap around Borough's leg as he began to throw him around. As Barou landed on the floor, Rex would say, "You know, Barou, to challenge me for the Kaiser's helmet, to try to become chieftain of monsters, you're insane. Sadly, it's not going to pay off." As he would try to step on him, Barou would roll out the way, as Barou would dodge every attack he threw at him. As he had a plan, Barou learned a technique which was very good against monsters. You see, even though they haven't fought monsters in a long time, the Pope teaches all his soldiers how to deal with them, just in case they ever come back. As then Barou would jump as high as he could, landed on the monster's head, and crushing its skull. Monsters are extremely powerful, but many of them, especially lizards, have a very soft head, as he just stepped on it over and over and over again, crushing him. As he fell to the floor defeated, all the lizards surrounded Barou and bowed. As Barou would put on the helmet and say, "I am now the new chieftain, Chieftain Barou, leader of the lizard men, and soon to be leader."
After Borough's victory, he would officially be the chieftain, the leader of the lizard men. However, with the other tribes defeated, he would try to gather them up, as some of them were wolf creatures, others were giant flies. Every single creature was different. As they all gathered up to Barou, he now had 7 tribes. He gave a speech. "You are no longer a tribe, but a nation. We are now united as one, but we need a banner, a symbol to unite us. Bring me some paper and some water." They were confused. The nation? They haven't heard that word in so long. The monster didn't know what a nation was. They just simply lived in tribes and fought each other. Eventually, one would bring Barou a piece of paper. As he dipped it into the water, the monster's water was black and as dark as their world around them. As he pulled it out, the paper was pure black, but then Barou would simply put his thumb that was bleeding. He cut his thumb and put it on the paper, making a black piece of paper with a red dot in the center, creating his flag, creating his banner. From now on, they'll be known as the Unity. From this moment forward, Barou needed to unite more tribes. Barou wanted to unite all the monsters under one. Barou would be sitting down on his new throne. He was not one for showing off power. However, he needed to show these monsters who was in charge. He needed to show them that he was their leader, and he was going to lead through respect and fear. As Barou sat down, Luna would walk up to him. Luna was a new person who joined. She was the head of the wolves, the second in command. She watched her chief get slaughtered, and after that she believed that Barou could unite her people. As she would walk up to him and tell him the location of the chest plate. As Barou held out the helmet, he would look up and say, "What's up with the Kaiser's armor?" She would say, "No one can get past the wall. We can't even fly over it. There's a magical barrier. The only way to get past it is by wearing the Kaiser's armor and destroying it." Barou would then nod and say, "So I need the armor. What's the next piece?" "There's a chest piece guarded by dragons, mole men, and the snake people. It also has a river around it." As Barou would say, "Great. So it's a fortress, completely surrounded, and there's things that can fly and attack us. Is it true dragons can breathe fire?" She would go, "No, don't be ridiculous. This isn't a fairy tale." As then Barou would say, "Right. Well, let's get the troops ready." As Barou would mount his troops, it was time for him to fight these people. However, Barou had a plan, and his army slowly began to surround the rivers. As a month passed, Barou gathered up his army and taught them how to make dynamite and other explosives. As the dragons came, they threw dynamite and had sticky mud on it that stuck to the dragons and blew them up. As they went to the river, flies would fly into the river and die on purpose, as this would make a bridge under their corpses. As Barou's army crossed over the river, snakes would come over top of it, but his wolves would claw down the snakes. As it was a fearsome battle, the siege began. Even though Barou clearly had the numbers advantage, they were dug in, and Barou needed a quick victory to end this, and the mole men would crawl underground and attack them from behind. If this continued up, Barou couldn't win, so he had a plan. When the holes were dug, Barou sent his men in with dynamite and blew themselves up, collapsing the mines and destroying them. As they continued to push forward into the castle, eventually 2 chieftains would show themselves, the Snake Chieftain and the Mole Chieftain, as Barou would look at them both with the helmet that gave him powers. As the Snake Chieftain would suddenly grow arms, as he would grab a sword and say, "This is a secret," as the Mole Chieftain would put on a plate as it would magically grow to fit him, as the mole would say, "So you're the human, huh? The human that united tribes and are now trying to unite us all. We've tried this many times. Every time a chieftain tried to unite us all, he would be killed or betrayed. Your journey ends here, Barou." As the chest plate gave the mole electric powers, and she shot electricity right at Barou, but Barou would use his helmet to teleport behind and kick down the Mole Chieftain, as the helmet gave him the ability to teleport. As he would be fighting 2 people, the snake would slither, knocking Barou down and trying to slash him down with the sword, but Barou would get up and teleport away each time. The helmet gave him the power of teleportation. As they continued to battle each other, Barou couldn't do it. He couldn't defeat 2 chieftains at once. However, if they attacked each other, he could. As he tricked the snake to charge in after him, he jumped out of the way at the last second, making the snake bite the mole. As the mole fell down and died from the venom, Barou would laugh. "You're an idiot. You killed your own comrade. I don't need him. I only need myself. The snakes are a superior version of the monsters. We will unite us all." As then, the snake would charge at Barou, as Barou would grab the snake by the tail and throw it into the water. As the snake would get up, he would start to breathe, as Barou would say, "You're not a river snake, are you?" As he would teleport again and knock the snake down. As the snake kept trying to crawl up, he would knock him into the water again and again and again and again, until he was drowned by his own trap. As then he would put on the chest plate and grab the sword. But as he did, he heard a voice. As Barou suddenly would faint. As he began to look around, though, he would see something strange. What Barou saw was, well, Barou would begin to see a strange figure. It was only 5 feet tall, with red eyes and sharp diamond-like teeth as it began to eat glass. Its arms and legs were extremely skinny. He walked over to him. His skinny arms and legs began to sag. As Barou would say, "Who are you?" "I am the Kaiser, the leader of the monsters, or at least I was 300 years ago, until the Pope defeated me." Barou would then look at the mighty Kaiser, as he would say, "I assumed you'd be bigger. I get that a lot. I get my power from my magic, not my size. Like how you were small and took down a giant snake. I thought it would be a monster to unite my people. It appears I was wrong." Barou would say, "How are you talking to me? Didn't you die?" "I should have, but before I was defeated, I put my soul into the armor. Once it's assembled, I will be inside your body. Your body will have 2 souls, 2 consciousness all at once. Are you ready for that?" Barou would say, "I'm ready for anything, as long as I get to defeat the Pope." Kaiser would say, "Good. And I have a way to defeat him this time," he would say, smirking. "I realized it after I was defeated, though, but he has a weakness. I've been watching everything from afar, from my armor, from my plates, from my monsters, and even from a few humans. I think I have an idea. But from now on, we'll be partners, and I'll help you assemble the rest." Barou would nod and say, "How will you help me assemble 100 tribes?" "Well, I can send messages through my armor. I will tell all the chieftains to meet you, and you will battle them all. That way we'll save time. Besides, you've already proven yourself worthy." Barou would then nod, as him and the Kaiser shook hands, as suddenly he was cut back to reality as he looked around. Bruno would be there for him,
As he looked at Luna, said, "What happened?" "You defeated the chieftains and passed out. Shortly after, I led the men in the battle, and we won." As all the men looked at Barou, as the flies, the snakes, the dragons, they all bowed, as Barou said, "We will continue our conquest, but first, I will battle all the chieftains one-on-one in single combat to prove myself to all of you. This war is wasting our lives and wasting our troops. We need as many monsters alive as possible to go into the human domain." As he would smile, and it said, "The great Kaiser spoke to me and said I was chosen to unite us all." As there's been rumors of Kaiser being able to speak with people with the armor, but they didn't know if he was telling the truth or not. But they decided to follow him because he was the strongest. The monsters admire strength above everything else. As the Kaiser let us into Barou's consciousness, we then would cut to the king, King Ludendorff. A long time ago, humanity was ruled by a single monarch. But when the Pope saved the humans from the monsters, he was able to get power and kick the monarchs out. However, they formed a resistance movement. Of course, the king would eventually die. Then he would pass it on to his daughter. Then she would pass it on to her son, until it went to King Ludendorff, who discovered immortality, just like the Pope. Now he leads the rebel forces to try to take back the throne. As he sat on his throne, hidden in a cave, hidden underground, hiding like an animal. He wanted a royal palace. He wanted a giant castle, but instead he had to hide underground, like he was nothing but a peasant. But his forces would tell him that Barou was thrown over the wall, as he got up and said, "That was the Pope's greatest commander. Without him, there is a power vacuum. We must strike now." As Ludendorff commanded his forces and began to go out to take over cities, Ludendorff wanted to expand his region. He knew this exploration wouldn't last forever, but he needed to take as much land as possible before the vacuum was settled. Little did he know, though, he might have an unlikely ally or another foe.
As Barou was assembling his army and getting ready to fight the generals and the chieftains, we cut to King Ludendorff. As Ludendorff was assembling his army, he was getting prepared to expand. He was getting prepared to conquer. As without Barou, the rebels could expand. As King Ludendorff got ready, he then began to launch his attacks. As we cut to the Pope would be sitting down. As the Pope looked around, he had a bad feeling. His magic was telling him that something was wrong, that something was coming out to get him. But it wasn't the rebels. The rebels weren't big enough to threaten him. So what was it? As eventually the crow flew towards him, and Pope said, "What was it?" As he said, "King Ludendorff is expanding. He wants to bring back the monarchy, and he thinks he can finally do it." Pope would get up and say, "What do you think is new?" as he sighed. As then he kicked the crow down to the floor. As the crow cried out in pain, Pope said, "Listen here. Send out some heroes." As the Pope sent out a few heroes, the heroes were people blessed with the Pope. You see, the Pope blessed people with his magic, giving them powers, and turned them into the heroes. As the crow would get up and say, "All right, sir, and remember, don't push them back too far. We need to make sure they're still alive so people have a threat to worry about instead of me." The crow would nod as he flew off. As then the Pope would stand up and look out the window as he thought about things, as he thought about his life. It's been so long since he overthrew the monarchy, since he saved humanity and made them banner around him. As then he smirked. "I have the power. I am chosen by God, and I will lead humanity. Nothing can stop me." As then we cut back to Barou. As all the chieftains were gathering together, each one different. One was a giant wolf, one was a giant bat, one was a monster made out of slime. Each one was completely different, and Barou was going to have to fight them one by one. As the Kaiser would start to talk in Borough's head, "Are you ready now? Are you ready to fight each chieftain one-on-one? If you die, I'll just have another one fight. We need to unite soon. The Pope's becoming too powerful. I've been waiting for the perfect warrior. You might be it." Barou would say, "How flattering," as then he would drink a shot of whiskey. As then he would start to look around.
As each chieftain one by one lined up to fight Barou, first would be the giant wolf. As Barou would say, "What object do you even have?" As the wolf would start to grow hands. As then, he grabbed a sword, a giant one, and began to swing it towards Barou. As Barou dodged, he said, "Not bad, not bad," as he teleported behind the wolf and kicked it. The wolf kept swinging over and over. The wolf was fast, but Barou was more agile, and if Barou got hit once, he would be doomed. However, he began to summon his inner strength. He then started to think about the Pope. Think about what he did to him. He took away his childhood. He took away everything from him. He turned him into a monster. And worse, he got rid of the love of his life. He got rid of the one thing that kept him sane, the one thing that kept him going, the one thing that made him believe in love. As Barou began to scream back at the wolf, he would teleport inside of its body and jump out of its stomach. As it fell down, Barou would grab the sword as it would shrink down to his size. As the Kaiser would say, "God, that was barbaric." Barou would say, "Barbaric, yes, but effective, yes."
So it was a giant ball of sentient pink slime, made from pure slime. The slime was hot enough to burn you to the touch, as it started to shoot out its body parts, like tentacles. As Barou would keep dodging it, he would teleport around the slime, but the slime would expand and move underground, making it so Barou couldn't get to it. No matter where he teleported, the slime was always there. But then Barou would pull out the sword, as he waited for the slime to get closer and closer, as then he spun as fast as he could, making a tornado as he went over to the slime, destroying it. As the slime dropped a ring, as Barou picked up the ring, he felt more power course through him. As then Barou was able to grow tentacle-like slimes from the ring. Interesting. Bring me my next opponent.
As Barou himself was ready to fight, someone would fly towards him, as it was a giant bat. As the bat screeched at Barou, as it opened its mouth, ready to devour him. As the bat flew, he then began to swing at Barou with his strong-like claws. As he would fly in each time, Barou would grab it with its tentacle-like slimes and try to pull it down. But the bat was fierce, and even with this was able to struggle and screech at Barou, sending him flying with his atomic breath. As Barou got back up, though, he began to cause a tornado, but the bat flew down the center and grabbed him. As he was about to eat him, Barou would then shoot slime into its mouth, filling it until it blew up. As Barou fell to the floor, the bat would drop a chest plate. Barou would say, "Where did he even keep that?" The Kaiser would say, "With the magic, we're able to absorb it into our bodies, even if we can't wear it." As Barou would then put on the chest plate, suddenly he could grow bat-like wings. As Barou would fight chieftain after chieftain, and each time he was victorious, until he united all the tribes under him. As he gathered up his armies, he would walk up to the magic wall, the barrier.
Giant wall began to shake and tatter, as Barou simply touched it with all of his armor, as he began to put his magic into it. The magic imbued in there for centuries, stopping anything from destroying it, stopping anything from flying through it, except for those the Pope threw down. Suddenly, the wall broke. As the wall began to tear apart, Barou and his armies began to march in, as he led an army of monsters. As Barou would go to village, most of the places near the wall were just small villages and didn't have much of a defense. As he went to the villages, he forced those who could fight into his army, or destroyed them. As he left a few alive in each town, so they can govern. As he wanted to make a legion, his plan was to make a horde, conquering place to place. Each town they conquered would gather more soldiers, until he defeated the Pope. Then he'll mix both cultures, and creates a new nation. As Barou did this throughout most of the villages, he would have a few human soldiers, nothing to write home about, but it was noteworthy until he reached his first challenge, the city of the mountain. But this mountain town was special to Barou. It housed his father and was his old home. As part of Barou wanted to burn it down forever, to forget the past. But it was time for him to take it. As his legions surrounded the town, he began to march. As a hero was there, his name was Nixon. As Nixon would see the army, he would talk to the guards, distract them while I take down Barou. You really think you can do it? I don't know, but I have to, for the Pope, as then he left. The guards would be frantic. The garrison was small, but they had a great wall and a strong army for what it was. They would try to get as many people as they could to fight. As then they found someone, Barou's dad, as now he was an old man. As the guards would burst into his house, he would look at them and begin to yell. Alex was his name. Alex didn't want to go anywhere, but they forced him to. As the guards would take him out, they would begin to speak with Barou. As Barou's army went around the wall, one of the guards would say, "Stop! If you attack this city, we'll get rid of your father." As in, he grabbed him. As Barou said, "My father's dead to me anyway. Drop him." As this shocked the guard, as Alex would say,
"Oh, son, look at what you've become, a monster, a freak." As he cried, "I can't believe you become such a thing," Barou would say, "I became what you made me." As then a flashback would occur, as Barou was simply a child, dancing in the room, as his dad would walk in and say, "What are you doing?" "I want to be a dancer, Dad. I'm practicing." As then he said, "Dancing's not manly." As then his father would push him to the floor and say, "You need to be manly," as he would yell at him like he normally did. His father instilled manly values into him and forced him to conscript. The military paid people for children that signed up, so his father forced him into the army. As Barou would look at his father, he would say, "Do me a favor and drop him." The guards were shocked, but just then, Barou would teleport behind him and punch what looked like the air, as suddenly Nixon fell down. "Huh, you thought you could sneak up on me? Hey, how did you know it was me leading the army? That must mean..." As he teleported away, he grabbed the crow and then teleported back. As Nixon charged at Barou, Barou would say, "Be a doll and let me talk to this messenger." As then, Luna would jump in and begin to fight Nixon. As Barou would look at the crow and say, "You've been spying on me, haven't you? Well, tell the Pope something." The crow would say, "What?" "Tell the Pope I'll take his head, just like he took Alfred's." As Barou let go of the crow, he flew away to talk to the Pope. As he looked up at Barou, "Are you sure? Do I really have to say this?" Barou would say, "Yes, you do." As the crow would then sigh and fly off. As Barou would walk to Nixon, as Luna would destroy Nixon over and over again, ripping him apart. But Nixon had the power of resurrection, as he would get up each time. It was Nixon's only power. However, he was an excellent sharpshooter, as he would pull out his steam musket and begin to shoot the ground, as it bounced back and hit Luna in the arm. As in, Luna would then fall down with her arm broken. As then Nixon would say, "No matter how many times you strike me down, I will always get up. I am the Pope's weapon, the Pope's sword, and the Pope's shield. I will defend this land." As suddenly Barou would grab him from behind and rip him in half. As then Nixon would automatically phase back together. Barou would say, "I can end your resurrection, you know." Then Nixon would say, "Do it. Destroy me. In the name of the Lord, in the name of the Pope, I will die." As then Barou would say, "No, I have a better idea." As suddenly he would summon a force field around Nixon. Nixon would hit the force field. Nixon would start to scream, but no matter what he did, he could not get out of this. As Nixon would begin to panic, "Let me out, let me out, let me out," Barou would simply say, "No, I am not going to let you out until you see the truth. I can tell that there's memories there that have been erased or held back by the Pope." Barou then reached his hand into the bubble and touched Nixon's face, as in the memories that were being held back were gone. As Nixon would simply sit there and not say a word, Barou would say, "You can think about it." As Barou and his army marched to the city, we then cut to the Pope, as the Pope was talking to one of his advisors. As the Pope would say, "I want to test how strong this King Luton North is to see if he's worth my time. With Barou coming in, I'm going to have to deal with the rebels soon. They were a great distraction for people, but that time is over. Send in the 5. The man would then nod, then walk off. As then the crow would fly by and say, "Pope, Pope, I have a message for you." The Pope would look at the crow and walk to it. "What is that?" Barou said, "Your head will be next." As then the Pope would grab the crow and say, "So you're doing work for him now, huh?" The crow would say, "No, I just. As then he dropped him to the floor and said, "Relax, I'm just messing with you." Anyway, I have a feeling that this war's gonna drag on for a while. Why don't you just go and fight Barou? I could do that, but I want to see how strong he really is before I test him. I want to see if he's worthy to fight me. After all, I am God's sword, and I will not slaughter something that isn't worth my time. As in, we cut to King Ludendor.
King Ludendor and Commander Vanessa seized a massive city. Vanessa was a revolutionary who wanted to bring something new, a new system of government to the people, for the people. But Ludendorff wanted to bring back the old monarchy. The rebels were made up of the radicals and the monarchists, who were fighting together to get rid of the Pope. As they took the city, King Ludendorff would begin to give a speech. As suddenly, Vanessa would teleport behind King Ludendorff and stab an invisible man as he fell down dead. As Ludendorff would say, "I can see them. Are you sure it's the 5? As then he would say, "Yeah, that was just a spy. Come on out, 5. You can sit down, Vanessa." Vanessa would say, I told you to sit down. As Vanessa and King Ludendorff looked at each other, the commander would sit down. As suddenly, 5 heroes would show up. One of them was a woman, big and strong, covered in metal. Her name was Iron Fist. As she walked up to King Ludendorff, "Are you prepared to say your prayers?" Ludendorff would say, "No, but I am prepared to bring back the monarchy, to bring back my rightful land. The monarchy shall rule again." She simply laughed and said, "You talk too much," as she punched him. Higher ground would shake as suddenly wind came off from her fist, destroying the mountain behind him. As then the king looked at her and said, "Are you done yet?" As then he slightly moved his hand, causing her to evaporate. As then he would say, "Who's my next enemy?" As then one of them turned into pure fire, the other pure electricity, as they both charged at King Ludendorff, shooting him with enough fire and electricity to burn down an entire city, with volts of electricity reaching up to the 100,000s. But King Ludendorff simply stood there and said, "Borin." As then he moved his hand and punched them both to the grave. As then he walked up to the Nexorcist. As then he looked at him and began to summon waves of undead. If they charged at Ludendorff, Ludendorff would begin to destroy them by punch until he got up to him. As then he said, "I surrender." As the other two looked at him like a coward, suddenly the Nexorcist would pull out a weapon, destroying them both, blasting them with a steam pistol. Weaklings. They put all in offense and none in defense. King Ludendorff would say, "Why would you surrender to me?" "Because I recognize the true king." As then he would bow. Vanessa would say, "He's clearly doing this so he lives. You can't trust him." King Ludendorff would say, "Hush now. I think he'll be a good addition to the army. What's your name?" He would smile and say, "Rex." As then we cut back to Barou. Barou was at the siege of the city as him and his men would take it over. As then he would look at Nixon. As Nixon would think back to his life. As we cut back to Nixon when he was a kid. Nixon was an ordinary child. He had a loving parents, a loving family. Unlike Barou, however, all that would change one day as he heard a knock on the door. As some priests came in. As his father would start to talk to him, Nixon would stay up in his room. As his mom would come up with tears in her eyes. "You've been chosen to be a hero." Nixon would say, "Really? A legendary hero?" As then he began to walk out. As the priest would take him away, he would meet the Pope.
Nixon would be excited. The Pope has been a legend for their people for a long time. He was the one that defeated the Kaiser. He was the one that restored order, and he was the one who saved everyone. He would get to work for him. Nixon would say, "I can't wait to work for you. When am I going to see my parents again?" Nixon would say, "Your parents? You don't have parents. I created you." As then Nixon would say, "What are you talking about?" The Pope would then slowly touch his forehead, as he would instill magic inside of him and erase the memories of his parents, and put in fake ones that he was created by the Pope. After that, the Pope would then put Nixon through training to make him a master martial artist, and to give him the power to come back after death, no matter how many times he died. As then, we cut to present day. As Nixon would say, "I need to see my parents." "Barou, please," as suddenly the force field would disappear. Luna would say, "You really trust him?" "No, but I see those looks in his eyes. I know he has something to do, but first, I have an idea." As then, Barou would cast a spell on Luna. Do you mind delivering a head for me?
As then Boro would look at Luna and say, "Ready?" She would say, "As ready as I ever been." As then he would chop off her head. As Nixon would say, "What are you doing?" Luna would then talk, "Relax. This spell makes it so I can live like this." As then Boro would give Nixon her head. "Tell him you destroyed one of my great chieftains. However, you were unable to defeat me. If I know the Pope, a head will definitely satisfy him. Once he puts her in her trophy room, she can talk to me telepathically, like a spy." Nixon would then nod and say, "All right." As then Nixon would go back to the Pope. As we cut to a few days later, the Pope was sitting down, as he was about to go and fight Ludendorff, when suddenly he got a knock on the door. He opened it to see Nixon.
Nixon would then throw the Pope Luna's head and say, "Here, I did it. I managed to defeat a chieftain." The Pope would say, "Very well done. They're extremely powerful. You seem winded." The Pope would then check to see how many times he died today. "Ah, quite a bit. She took you down quite a bit, didn't she? Well, no matter. You still won. I blessed you on this gift, and you have gifted me something. That's very kind of you. Soon, he will be defeated. Soon the monsters will be cast away once again. This time, maybe permanently." Nixon would say, "What do you mean?" "Well, first time I cast them away beyond the wall, because when they battled each other, it created magic. And magic helps the world go round. You see, the world tries to balance itself whenever it's unbalanced. So I let them live for balance sake. However, soon I'll be powerful enough that won't matter. That I can get rid of all threats, and not have to worry about the universe pestering me, because God gave me this power." Nixon would be confused, but he wouldn't really care, as then he would run off to see his parents, as the Pope would sit there and throw Luna in with the rest of his collection of his new battle plans, as Luna would sit there and watch, as she would send telepathic signals straight to Boro, as Boro would start to get all the information. As Boro and his army continued to expand, he continued to thrive. As the Pope was becoming desperate, he needed a new supreme commander. He needed someone to take Boro's old place, but he simply didn't know who. The Pope also didn't want to fight a two-front war, so the Pope decided to deal with the rebels himself, as he got up and began to fly there. We cut to the monarchist, as Commander Ludendorff, the king of humanity, kept on expanding. No one else was with him, except for his soldiers. You see, the rebels are made up of two different factions, the radicals and the monarchists, but the radicals weren't there. Vanessa wasn't there. As he realized something, she set him up. As he would look around, suddenly the Pope would fly down. It would all begin to click. She must have betrayed him. She must have knew that the Pope would get fed up and try to fight him on his own. So, she didn't send her forces, so when he's dead, she can lead the rebellion. As King Ludendorff would look at the Pope and say, "This has been a long time coming," the Pope would laugh and say, "It has, hasn't it? Your father died by my hand. It only makes sense that you would die too, Ludendorff." As suddenly, the entire ground would shake, as Ludendorff would begin to summon waves and waves of electricity. 100,000 volts of electricity would hit the Pope, as Ludendorff would yell, "Die! Die! Die!" As then the Pope just stand there and saying, "You just yelled die like a pathetic child. You really are pathetic." As the Pope would slowly walk towards King Ludendorff, suddenly his hand would start to burn up, as King Ludendorff had sun hands, where he made his fist as hot as the sun, as then he would move and break the sound barrier, as he would punch the Pope over and over and over again until all of his weak points pushed him with the heat. But it did nothing, as the Pope simply said, "You're like a child, you know that? Truly pathetic." As suddenly, he would slightly move his hand. As then, King Ludendorff's arm would fall off. As then, he would start to yell as he regrew it. As then, the Pope would laugh, and King Ludendorff would say, "What, you have a healing factor? You really limited yourself. The fact that you have a healing factor means you've lost." The king would say, "What are you talking about? Your body uses a lot of magic to heal. You have a choice, make a healing factor or make strong skin." Strong skin cannot be impervious to everything, but a weak, pathetic attack like yours, it can easily manage. And doesn't use nearly as much magic. The fact that you made your body make a healing factor means you've limited yourself. And you call yourself a magic user? That's simply pathetic, the Pope would say. As then King Ludendorff would say, "Shut up!" As then he would swing his sword at him, a sword made so strong that it can cut diamond itself. As he would swing it and hit him with it over and over and over, the Pope simply smiled and said, "Wow, as much as I want to keep fighting you, I don't want this pathetic charade to last." As he snapped his fingers, suddenly a cross appeared, as everyone was crucified except for him. As the rest of his soldiers would start to cry in terror and fear, King Ludendorff would say, "This isn't over!" As he would charge at the Pope would say, "It is." As suddenly, a light would appear for a split second, as King Ludendorff would fall to the ground and begin to cough up. As then the Pope said, "I simply canceled your healing factor. I put harmful toxins in your body. Now your body will try to heal it over and over again, as you'll be in a constant state of pain until you eventually die from overloading." As then the Pope flew away. As he looked around, "Why didn't you guys attack?" The soldiers said, "We knew it wouldn't do anything." As they all died. As then King Ludendorff would fall down. After hours of battling this poison, after hours of being in constant pain, he would die. As then Rex, the Nexorcist, would walk out. As Rex, the Necromancer, would look down at King Ludendorff's body, this is what he planned, as he hid his power and waited off and hid. As he grabbed the body and then went back to his base. As he built a secret base below ground, as he would throw down King Ludendorff and begin to extract his soul. Since King Ludendorff was extremely powerful, this would take a while. But with his soul, he could absorb his power, and he can build an entire army of the undead. As Rex was doing this, we cut to someone else. Someone that was just a low-level general. A general of a small garrison, MacArthur. With Barou's army quickly seizing land, he wouldn't be able to attack it and be there for every battle. So one of his chieftains was there, the Lizard Man, who led an army to take this small city. As MacArthur had an idea how to defend it, he had a few steam tanks, so what he did was paint cars white and make them look like steam tanks. You see, cars were very rare and only nobles had them, but there were a few nobles in town. He was able to make that look like they had more tanks than they actually did. Since the Lizard Man would use bats to fly from above and look down, they wouldn't have the best view, as they would use echolocation to try to sense where things were, and he was able to use that to his advantage and make cars look like tanks, as he would put all the fake tanks in front of the castle, as then the real ones would be in the back, making him go try to attack the back flank. This was all part of MacArthur's plan, and at the same time he had his snipers actually leave the castle and hide in bushes near the back, so they could snipe them as they come in. Even with this plan, there was no guarantee for victory, but he figured that this might be the only way to win. As then we cut back to the Lizard Man, Frank. As Frank heard this, he then decided to lead his army from the back to attack the castle from behind. As the soldiers would go in and attack the castle, they would easily destroy the wall. As they came in though, the steam tanks would fire from the sides, flanking them. As the men did a flanking maneuver, this would push them out for a while, but MacArthur knew the army was too big for him to win by destroying them all. He needed to go after targets, like the Central Command Center, as the snipers would then go after the generals and the commanders, the people in charge, making their flank weakened, as MacArthur had his forces push out. As this caused the army not to know what to do, so they retreated. This shocked everyone, especially Frank. Frank was angry. Monsters were taught to fight. Monsters were taught with strength for everything. But they were so used to winning battle after battle, they weren't used to this hardship. As then Frank would get so angry, he would order the city to be burnt down, as he would light bats on fire and have them charge into the buildings, burning it to the ground, as Frank got out to fight. Little did he know, this is what MacArthur planned for. He knew Frank was a prideful person, and that he would try to fight himself with the worst tactics. MacArthur built a little bunker below the town for all the soldiers to hide in, as then the army would begin to march over it, as this was their one chance to assassinate Frank. MacArthur would have a sniper. This bullet was made to kill magical beings. It wouldn't work on high-level beings like the Pope or Barou, or even beings that could come back to life like Nixon. But a chieftain like Frank, this would work. As in, MacArthur would hide in a building, as he would wait for Frank to walk over, as he made sure Frank thought all the soldiers were gone. As MacArthur would stay on the building and snipe Frank, as soon as Frank fell, all the soldiers would rise up from the bunker and attack them, flanking them, surround them, doing anything they can, screaming, making loud noises, setting things on fire, as he would run around and make sure the enemy didn't know how many of them there were. The armies fled, as MacArthur was victorious. As this victory would not go unnoticed, as MacArthur's army was prepared to continue to defend.
He knew this trick wouldn't work more than twice. If Barou or a better general came, he would lose. But MacArthur wouldn't get reinforcements. His town wasn't that important. However, something unexpected would happen. A crow would fly down and say, "MacArthur, we saw your great victory and decided to send reinforcements to the town. This will be a great front against Barou." MacArthur would say, "Thank you. And there's more. The Pope himself is coming in a day."
MacArthur was shocked. Most of these soldiers were either radical or simply fighting because they were forced to fight. MacArthur was neither. MacArthur actually enjoyed battle. MacArthur enjoyed proving he was a great commander.
But MacArthur despised the Pope. The Pope could have gotten rid of the rebels ages ago, but he simply uses them as a sideshow to control people. The Pope is not a commander. MacArthur wanted the world to be owned by the military. He wanted a true commander.
Even though Barou could give that, he sided with them because this is his home and he'll fight to defend his home, even if he disagrees with it. As the crow would tell him this, MacArthur would nod. As a day would pass, and stare right at the Pope would look at him. As the Pope was confused for a while. Did he get out about how he views the Pope? Was the Pope going to slaughter him? That's what he thought at first, but he didn't seem mad or angry. The Pope would say, "I heard about your great victory, and that is why I'm here to make you the next supreme commander." MacArthur doesn't smile a lot. He's been through a lot, and well, he prefers to keep his emotions hidden. However, hearing this news, for the first time in a long time, MacArthur smirked, as he felt a small volt of joy fill his body. Now he could finally prove himself as a commander. Now he can finally lead armies and wave the men. And he can finally make society into what he wanted. As then MacArthur and the Pope looked at each other, MacArthur would say, "Thank you." The Pope would laugh and say, "Most people would be more excited. However, considering I heard you never smile, I guess I'll take it. Come, follow me. What about the garrison? This garrison's just a small town. It doesn't matter. Besides, Barou's gonna try to go straight for the capital, so I have a plan." As then, the Pope's wings would begin to flap. As MacArthur would grab onto the Pope, he would then fly to the capital. As Barou was sitting down, he began to sing magical signals straight to Luna, who was ahead, watching. As Barou would say, "Are you there?" Luna would say, yes, I'm here. I'm ahead. Where else would I be?" As she would watch MacArthur being inaugurated, as she would tell him that the rebels were destroyed and MacArthur was a new commander. Barou was confused. Barou was a high commander and knew a lot of soldiers and generals. But MacArthur, he's only seen him once, and that was the garrison, a small town. How did he prove himself? Once he heard the full story, MacArthur seemed like a genius, and Barou knew that this was his new rival. As he smirked, "Finally, someone to test my might against. Not my physical might, but my might as a general and commander." Luna would say, "Yeah, I'm happy for you. When will I get my body?" Barou would laugh and say, "Soon, very soon." As then he canceled the transmission. As Barou would look out the window and see the destruction he's caused, as he saw the cities burned down, Barou would say, "I know you wouldn't want this, Alfred, but I'm selfish. and I need revenge. As then we cut back to MacArthur and the Pope. As the MacArthur and the Pope looked at each other, the Pope would say, "Can you kneel down?" MacArthur didn't like this, but he would do it anyway as he kneeled down. The Pope would then give him the commander's outfit, an outfit made of pure gold. "This is your Supreme Commander outfit. I had to take it off from Barou. There's been 22 Supreme Commanders. You are the 22nd, about to fight the 21st. As MacArthur says, "So, what are my orders?" "To defend the capital. You see, Borough's gonna try to flank and surround it. I need you to protect the flank and make sure he can just barely pinch her to it. That way, he'll be surrounded, and I can fight him one-on-one to prove myself. I could try this out and outright, but I don't trust Barou. He would try to trick me, and his men could give him support. He is my equal. The only way this can be fair is if we both battle each other." MacArthur didn't like the Pope, like I said, but him hearing this made him respect him. He believed this was a true way to fight between warriors, to fight each other one-on-one.
As then we cut to Rex. Rex, the top necromancer, was trying to absorb King Ludendorff's soul. If they can combine souls like Barou and the Kaiser did, he can become much more powerful. As he would put down his body in a ritual and begin to chant over and over and over again, as it took days, but eventually he would absorb his soul. As King Ludendorff would say, What's going on?" Rex would smile and say, "We are now one being, and now our powers are enormous."
He would look around. Rex was surrounded by a cemetery, as then he would slightly raise his hand. As they all turned into skeletons and rose from the dead, he would smirk. "Now I can create my own army." King Ludendorff would say, "But you forgot one thing. Now that I'm inside you, I can try to take control of your body." "True, you could. However, I'm the only one who knows the necromancy spells. And even with our powers combined, my body was not made for strong battling. So, you're going to have to rely on magic. A technique that you don't really like that much." King Ludendorff would snarl and say, "You bastard." As he said, "Oh, come on now. You enjoy it. Besides, we're partners now. And together we can rule this planet. Don't you want to bring back a monarchy?" King Ludendorff would say, "I want to bring back the human monarchy, not an undead monstrosity." "We'll see about that. You'll change your mind soon enough, and we'll be kings of humanity." As Rex would begin to laugh. As in, we cut to MacArthur. As MacArthur would be sent back to the front lines, ready to fight. As him and his army were ready to serve, he only had simple orders. Was to make sure that Pope could barely reach the capital and make sure that he couldn't surround it. So to stop him, he had an army next to the capital. Arthur's job was to make sure it wasn't flanked, as another commander stood in front of the capital to stop Barou from coming in, but that commander wasn't going to be able to do it. MacArthur knew Barou was cunning, and he wished that he got to command an army against him. He wanted nothing but to prove to everyone that he was the better supreme commander, but for now, he must protect his position. As it was a mountain with passes, MacArthur built defenses all around it. As he wasn't actually going to use it, he knew that they would easily pummel through any defense he made. That's why he would hide in caves and wait for them to march forward and attack them from behind and around, especially since they relied on flight, because he was going against the legendary chieftain, the Mothman. As we cut to Mothman, he had his bats and moths fly over the area and scout things out. As they flew from the sky, MacArthur would use scarecrows as he dressed them up to trick him. Keep in mind that his weapons and arms were down there, along with a few steam tanks, so they were not able to fully see everything. This would trick them and fly back. However, Mothman was worried because he heard of MacArthur's last trick. As he said, he's probably planning something. So he wanted to make sure everything was safe. His plan was to light everything on fire and just burn it all down to the ground. As Mothman would get his troops ready, they would launch napalm from the sky, burning the men down there, burning the scarecrows, burning everything. But this made MacArthur smile. Because of all the fire, they wouldn't be able to see them through the smoke and ash, and they can quickly get behind enemy lines. and set everything up for motion. As that's exactly what they did. As MacArthur would get all his men to set everything up. He may not have Nora's steam tanks, but he didn't need it. He had the element of surprise. As Mothman and his army went through the pass, they marched through the burning ash, marching through the death and destruction. As MacArthur's men would hide behind them, hiding in caves, getting their sniper rifles ready. As suddenly, rocks began to fall above them. As MacArthur's men would get onto the mountain and throw down rocks, throw down everything they could, as the magic mages would cast their spells, burning down the forest around them, spreading the fire that was already created, making it so they can't see, as suddenly men one by one were all taken down. Mothman would see this and began to get angry. As he would flap his wings so fast, the fire would disappear. But as that happened, there was nothing but darkness, as he was all alone, as he heard footsteps around him.
Mothman would fly and be able to tear around any soldier. As he began to fly up, he organized a retreat to fall back and gain a better position. As Mothman was able to fly around, any soldier or any weapon that was shot against him, he was able to stop. As a sniper was there with a special weapon made to kill chieftains. As he fired it though, Mothman would dodge it in midair and fly down and chop him in half. As Mothman would say, monsters admired strength above all else. However, my strength wasn't enough to make leader prowess. As he realized his defeat, he was forced to fall back with his army. As everyone cheered MacArthur's name, as MacArthur would say, "Stop cheering, the war's only just begun. Besides, this battle was nothing but a sideshow for the main show." As we cut to Barou, as his army would begin to march towards the capital.
It was only a matter of time before the armies met, and the Pope and Barou's forces got closer to the capital. MacArthur was given a simple job: to stop Barou from surrounding and taking over the capital. As MacArthur's forces will be presented to the left to make sure that the capital cannot be completely surrounded. This will make it so Barou would have to take on the capital head-on with all of his forces. As Barou was preparing an assault, he knew it was going to be the final battle soon. As we cut to Luna, as Luna's been feeding him information about best way to enter the city, about secret ways underground. Barou knew that Luna needed her body back, so he called on Nixon to help him out. As Nixon would visit the capital, the Pope himself would see him. "Oh, my son, what brings you here?" The Pope said, looking down on Nixon, as Nixon would say, "Sir, I came here for a special weapon, a weapon that will aid me in my battles." As the Pope would throw him an angelic weapon. As it was a pistol, he would say, "This has a power. Each bullet is filled with fire and explosives. You are one of my best agents, Nixon. May it serve you well." As then the Pope went off, the Nixon made sure no one was around as he took Luna's head and would run back into the ratways. You see, the Pope's capital was built onto an old city, the old capital. Before the Pope took over, the city was entirely annihilated during his takeover, but the ruins survived under it. As then to her body, that was preserved with magic. As he put her head back on, Luna would stand up and say, "I can't believe I did that. Ugh." As then Nixon would say, "Yeah, to have your own head get chopped off and just sit there? You must be really loyal." Luna would say, "Of course. Barou is the strongest. Monsters have a strength culture. It doesn't matter what gender they are, what species they are. If they're stronger than you, you follow them. Simple." Nixon would say, "Shouldn't that lead to messed up things?" Luna would say, "Yeah, but the world already is messed up. Besides, this war will not end unless the Pope dies." Nixon would nod. "Alright, well, do you have the plans?" Luna would then get out a piece of paper and draw all the mapways. You see, there were underground tunnels that used to be a part of the old city that Barou's men could burrow under and use to get through the city. As she nodded, she gave the papers to Nixon, as Nixon would run back to Barou, as Luna would then run away. As Barou's men got closer and closer to the capital, we cut to another battle, a battle led by the Spider. That's what they called her. No one really knew her real name, as she was a giant spider with 4 arms. As she would shoot web all around her to make herself at home. As she would sit on the web, she would prepare her forces. As no one was able to beat MacArthur yet, even though MacArthur's forces were low in number, they still couldn't win. But she had an idea, as she knew that MacArthur would hide in the forest and hide in the mountains as an advantage. However, spiders loved mountains and forests, so she had a plan. Her plan was to camouflage the spiders and have them move in the trees to jump down on MacArthur. So that's what she did. As the giant spiders started to move, we cut to MacArthur. MacArthur knew about spiders, so we have an idea. He hated magic casters. He believed they were lazy and relied too much on their magic. However, he knew he needed them for this battle. So he had some mages disguised as prisoners as soldiers, as they put them out in the front lines, making them look like they were hiding, when in actuality they weren't. MacArthur knew spiders had great vision, so the spiders would find them and pounce on them, and when they did, they would get poisoned and start to fall down and die, as the rest of the army were out in the open up on top of the mountain, preparing. As the spiders thought that he was planning to snipe them off as they got to the mountain. The spiders easily devoured these enemies without a second thought. But as they started to approach the mountain, many of them started to fall down and die from the poison, as then the steam tanks began to roar, blasting them down, as MacArthur launched napalm into the forest, burning it to the ground, burning the spiders, as they had nowhere to run, and many of them were already dead from the poison. However, they kept on going. They fought to the bitter end. Even though MacArthur won the battle, he lost many men from the spider spirits. Even when they were poisoned on fire, they kept on fighting, and many other monsters were there. However, MacArthur would choose victory, as then he learned a new respect for them. MacArthur didn't know much about monsters. All he thought was they were savages, but seeing how they fought, he earned a new respect for them. As then they were forced to retreat, as Lady Spider lost, as MacArthur's forces stopped Barou from being able to surround the capital. As then we cut to Barou, as his army would march straight to the capital. As the Pope's men stood there, they prepared for a siege. As the siege began on the city, the armies would march as they surrounded the city. As then, Barou's men, the mole people, the tunnelers, would go down to the city, as Barou's front army would be surrounded with mostly humans and monsters in the back. Barou wanted to show them that humans can join their army. As Barou said, "Every city I took over, I forced them to join. You can join me and save your lives." Many of the people looked at each other, but one of the guards said, "No, we fight for the Pope," as they opened fire. As then Barou started to open fire himself, as he led an attack right into the city, as he would use his powers to destroy the front wall. But he knew this would cause all the soldiers to be focused on him, as Barou's army managed to sneak in and steal their supply, destroying their food, to try to make it so they couldn't win, to try to outlast them, to starve them. But as this was going on, the Pope finally flew down and said, "I think this lasted far enough, Barou. Let's stop this battle and have a duel, just you and me." Barou wanted the whole time. The whole reason he wanted this massive army was to make sure that his army was distracted. He knew the Pope wouldn't want to fight fair, so this army would stop them from doing that. As Barou and the Pope went out, the Kaiser would speak to Barou, saying, "I have a plan to win." As then Pope would laugh and say, "I know about the little Luna trick you did, and how you freed Nixon. That was all part of my plan. You think I'm an idiot, don't you? But I knew something like this would happen. I wanted someone to tear down that wall, to start another war." Barou would say, "Why? Why not just go in and destroy the monsters yourselves?" "Because I can speak to the earth. The earth has a spirit that gives us all of our powers. It blessed me, but the earth retaliates when you go against that balance. So I try to keep things as balanced as possible, allowing rebels, allowing monsters. But the earth finally got fed up with me having all this power, and did this. So that is why I must perish you, and I have a plan to absorb the power from the earth itself. But you don't need to know about that. Now do you?" "Order 66699, the Pope would say, as suddenly Nixon, who was standing by as a sharpshooter in case the Pope would cheat, turned
on Barou as he shot Barou in the back with a highly specialized bullet. This wouldn't be enough to kill Barou, but it was enough to limit his power, as then the Pope would punch him, sending him flying. As they both started to battle each other, each punch was strong enough to make the entire Earth shake. Even when Borou's power lessened, he was still strong enough to destroy the world. However, now the Pope had the advantage. As Barou started to fall back, the Pope would laugh. Funny, isn't it? You're known for outsmarting all your opponents in battle, and you are outsmarted by me. The Pope would start to step on Borou's chest, as Kaiser would say, "Open your chest up," as suddenly part of Borou's flesh would open up and grab the Pope and start to suck him in. As the Pope said, "What's this? I learned a new ability to combine a healing factor with my tough skin. As I use it, my body will start to heal as soon as you strike me, and it will start to suck you in. Healing factors are worthless, but for this technique, they're very powerful." As the Pope's leg would slowly start to get sucked in, he would punch Barou, shoot him with electricity, shoot him with fire, but even in his weakened state, he could not demolish him. This would take hours of non-stop beating on him that he simply didn't have. As his entire leg started to get sucked in, the Pope would say, "Stop this! Stop this!" Barou would say, "No, you will lay inside of me for years until I absorb all your magic and you slowly die." As you really think you could have defeated me, Pope? You're smart, I'll give you that. You knew way more than I thought you did. However, I had something you didn't. You sat in that silly palace and got lazy over time and let others do your bidding. Well, I learned to do things myself. That's the difference between you and I. As the Pope would get sucked in more and more, the Pope would say, "You know nothing what you're talking about. Once the Earth gets tired of you, you'll be wiped out too. You'll only have a few centuries at most. Prepare yourself, Barou. You'll see pain like no one's ever seen before. I will be avenged!" As the Pope would yell this, he would get sucked all the way into Borou's body, as his flesh would then heal itself, trapping him. As Nixon would get his mind back, he would run and say sorry, as Barou would say, "No, it's okay." As then he would go to his men and throw down the Pope's hat. As then the soldiers surrendered, as the Pope died. As then Barou would say, "Now it's time for a new beginning. The Pope may be gone, but MacArthur and other generals will not end this war just yet. However, victory is guaranteed, and after victory, we can finally make our own destinies. We can finally be who we want to be, and not be forced into this by this war machine." As then they all started to clap. As Barou smiled, the Pope was defeated. As then we cut to MacArthur and Rex. As MacArthur knew the war was over, he began to flee. As he met Rex,